Hello, I'm Mr. Kissinger, and this is 5th grade math, module 1, lesson 7. Today we're going to continue working on rounding decimals to to any place using place value understanding and a vertical number line. So if you look at number 1 here, we're going to, it says write the decomposition that helps you, and then round to the given place value. Draw number lines to explain your thinking. Circle the rounded value on each number line. So this is just the same process that we were using in lesson 7. So it says round 32.697 to the nearest tenth, hundredth, and 1. So let's start with the nearest tenth. So we make our number line, and we don't want to make our number line any bigger than we need to. So we're just going to put the next lowest and next highest tenth on the top and bottom. So for the bottom part here, our lowest tenth, let's look what we already have in our tens place. We have a 6. Not tens place, but tenths place. So we have 32.6. 32 and 6 tenths. So naturally, our next highest tenth place would be 32 and 7 tenths. Now, what we can do to find our midway point, again, we can add these, zeros in here, because 6 tenths is really the same thing as 60 hundredths. And 7 tenths is really the same thing as 70 hundredths. And what number comes right in between 60 and 70? Well, that'd be 65. So we would have 32 and 65 hundredths. So remember, we don't need these zeros necessarily, but they help us to find our midway point. So I always like to add those just to make it a little bit easier for me to do so. And then what we need to do is we need to find out if 32.697 is in between these two numbers or in between these two numbers here. So is 32.697 between 32.65 and 32.7, or is it between 32.6 and 32.65? And we would need to look to our hundredths place. So our hundredths place here is a 9. 32.69 is higher than 32.65. 0.69 is greater than 0.65. In fact, it's almost 32.70 or 32.7. So it's going to be way up here, 32.697. And we know that our nearest tenth is going to be this. You got to remember, these zeros we just added to help us. If we're rounding to the nearest tenth, we don't need that hundredth place. So 32.7 would be rounded to the nearest tenth. Now we need to round to the nearest hundredth. We're going to do the same thing, except with our hundredths place. So what is our current hundredths place? It's a 9. So we have 32.69, and then we have 32. We got to increase our hundredths place by 1. Well, if we add 1 to 9, we're going to get 10. So we need to actually increase our tenths place by 1, and then our hundredths place is going to go back to 0. So that will end up being 32.70. And then right in between those two, what's in between 32.69 and 32.70? Well, let's add our zeros on the end to help us. So we have a 0 there. I'm going to make these like a dotted 0, just so we remember that that's not going to be part of our final answer. And we're going to be at 0.695. because 0.695 is right between 0.690 and 0.700. If we looked at these as 690 and 700, 695 would be right in the middle. So that's why you have to add those extra zeros just to find out what that halfway point is. And then we need to figure out if 32.697, is that closer to 32.70, or is it closer to 32.69? Is it higher or lower than our midway point? So if we go 3, 2, I think it's right in between these two. 32.697. We see our 7 here is bigger than our 5. So we know it's higher than this number here. And we're going to round up. So when we get our final answer, it'll be 32.70 when we round to our nearest hundredth. And finally, we're going to round to our nearest 1. So we have, in our ones place right now, it's just 32. And our next one up from 32 would be 33. And what is right in between 32 and 33? Well, that would be 32.5, 32 and a half. Now, is 32.697 greater than or less than 32.5? So is it going to fall between these two numbers or between these two numbers? Well, 32.6 is greater than 32.5, so we know 32.697 is going to go somewhere right in here. And when we round to the nearest 1, it's going to round to 33. So we're going to skip this letter B for right now. And I want to move on to a word problem. So whenever we do word problems, I always like to use our cubes strategy. These are CUB part of our cube strategy. So we're going to circle our numbers. So circle 132,554. I'm going to circle 100. I'm going to circle 1 day. That's an amount of time. And then we're going to underline our question. It says, how many cases did the factory produce in 1 day? And then it's going to ask us to round our answers to the nearest tenth of a case. And I'm going to box in our important information here, our tenth of a case. And about tells us about, and to the nearest tenth of a case, that tells us we're going to be rounding to find our answer. So show our thinking on a number line. So if we have 132,554 cases in 100 days, and about how many cases does the factory produce in 1 day? To find out how many cases they produce in 1 day, we're going to need to divide by 100 to find how much they do in 1 day. So we take our number 132,554, and we're going to divide by 100. And when we divide by 100, we're going to move our decimal place over 2 places. So we're going to put it right here, and we end up with 1,325.54. But we're not done yet. We need to round to the nearest tenth of a case. So let's make ourselves a number line here with our tenths. What's in our 10th place here? We have 1,325 and a half, or 0.5. And then our next tenth will be 1,325.6. right in between. Then we can add our little imaginary zeros here. And right in between 1,325 and 50 hundredths and 1,325 and 60 hundredths will be 1,325 and 55 hundredths. So when we look at 1,325 and 54 hundredths, is that greater than or less than 1,325 and 55 hundredths? Well, our 54 right here is lesser than our 55 right here. So we know it's going to go right underneath 1,325 and 54 hundredths. And we're going to round down to 1,325 and 5/10 or 1/2. So that'll tell us rounded to the nearest tenth of a case how much root beer the root beer factory produces in approximately in 1 day. All right. So that'll be it for lesson 8. We look forward to seeing you guys all next time, and you guys have an awesome rest of your day.